What was it that got you to that point where you became a real voice out there in what's going on in the country?
I got rich as fuck, so I didn't have to care what anybody thought.
I should have done that.
Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well trained, well equipped, and battle hardened.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
Good night and good luck.
Hey, folks, it's Rick Wilson. Welcome back to the Lincoln Project podcast. I am delighted to be joined today by a very special guest. It is Mark Cuban. You know Mark from a million different things: tech entrepreneur, Mavs owner, Shark Tank. And recently, he's become, I think, one of the most important political voices in the country by being a kind of non-political guy. He's also tackled some of the hardest problems out there with a really incredible new company called CostPlus Drugs, which is trying to take on one of these problems that everybody says is impossible, which is to bring down the price of pharmaceutical products for folks. So Mark is a really smart guy and a really down-to-earth guy at the same time. And Mark, I appreciate you coming on the show today. And I want to ask you, I want to jump right in here.
Sure.
You've become a really clear voice in our politics, and not in the same normal, like, left-right categories, but like a really voice of common sense and decency lately. What was it that got you to that point where you became a real voice out there in what's going on in the country?
I got rich as fuck, so I didn't have to care what anybody thought.
I should have done that.
I mean, I hate to be that crass about it, but you know, I, when you're on your way up, which I was for so many years, starting from the bottom, now we're here. It's just like you have to pay attention to everything around you. You have to be cognizant of what could turn your business or your financial life upside down. And for the longest time, I never paid attention to politics. Um, and then when Trump ran the first time, I got involved some with Hillary and learned a few lessons. And then, as things progressed through the Biden administration, learned a few lessons. And through the Harris campaign, learned a lot of lessons. And it was just like, look, it's at some point, since I'm an independent, I don't have to kiss anybody's ass. And, I'm focused on doing something I think is very beneficial, which is cost plus drugs and changing healthcare and trying to save lives and save money. And um, I just, I try not to take any of this for granted. And I just think I could have an impact. And I don't give money to politicians, as you know. And so it's not, I don't want it to be about, okay, I gave you money, listen to me. It's either my ideas hold up and you think there's value in them or they don't. And if they don't, that's fine too. So I really don't have to, play a role at all. I just, do what I think is right, say what I think is right, and go
So
from
you
there.
came out of the first big wave in the tech industry. You did broadcast.com way back in the 90s. You were the earliest of early adopters in this sort of business. The new model strikes me as it has attracted fewer guys from the kind of backgrounds that I think we come from, more regular folks who more upper middle
Mhm.
class kids. And it's gotten to this, like, it's become this very weird culture in Silicon Valley that has strange ideas about politics. And Musk is really affecting that, I think, at the national level of inserting some of the oddball nature of Silicon Valley into the White House, into the politics and what they're doing with Doge, all that. How has that culture that you experience changed? Because it strikes me as it's almost like an alien country now.
No, it's not so much that it's changed, honestly. So when
Mhm.
you talk to young kids who are trying to start companies in Silicon Valley, the cultures today and 25 years ago are very similar. That's very
Right.
entrepreneurial. They're trying to come up with ideas. We started streaming. Now they're building things around AI. That's very similar. It's really the people who have made a lot of money who are who are asking themselves, what can I do to have an impact? What can I do to change things? Or what's the next level I can go to
Mhm.
personally, financially, in impactfully in terms of my company or politically? And so I think you get you've got a set of circumstances right now where AI is going
Sure.
to be a multi-trillion-dollar business, and you've got these five, six, seven players that realize that it may be a zero-sum game. I don't think so. They don't think so, but they realize it's a greater than zero chance it'll be,
Mhm.
one big winner take all.
Sure.
And they all want to be that winner. And they will do whatever it takes to be on top with that outcome. So if that means writing Donald Trump a big check and kissing the ring, I mean, it makes perfect sense because all it takes is one swipe of the pen in an executive order, and they're out of the running. And so I think that's part one. And then you've got the Mark Andreessens of the world and
Yarvin.
the Curtis, that have this the Garvins that have this philosophical thing where they think they have a better way, which is just entrepreneurial in its own right. It's kind of crazy the point they've gotten to, in my opinion. But so it's just that those are the older
Mhm.
statesmen that have made a lot of money, who want to win AI, and who think that they're smarter than the politicians and can push them where they need to go.
That idea that, Musk was gonna come in and cut the size of government down. I mean, almost no one says wakes up in the morning and goes, we need a much bigger government." But I think a lot of people think we need a smaller and
Of
smarter and
course.
better government that is driven by some entrepreneurial principles. But what they're doing right now seems to me like this slash and burn, like cut it all and see what grows back. I'm not sure that's the best way to do it. As you've been a
Mhm.
serial entrepreneur, you've seen over and over again, you have to curate a company. You have to grow it into something to make it effective and to make it work. What are the lessons that you would have brought into this thing if President Harris had said to you, "Hey, Mark, help me reinvent government"? What would you have been doing?
Well, let's look at it like, if they fired Elon and brought me in, what would I do? Right? Because here where we are today. So trying to cut the size of government, even when I was out campaigning for Harris, like I talked to her specifically, we have to make government smaller. We have to deal with the deficit. And so then you say, well, how do you get there? And cutting a lot of people, for better or worse, comes with the territory. You can't make government smaller and not cut hundreds of thousands, if not, who knows, some significant number. And then there's, when you cut those people, there's the infrastructure that's going to go with it. But the question you want to ask is,
Mhm.
what's the best way to do it? And what they've done is ready, fire, aim. So if I walked in the door, there, there's two things you have to do. You have to have a plan, because shock and awe is great, but if there's no plan behind shock and awe, it's just shock and awful, not shock and
Right,
awe.
right.
And so, you know, and so putting together a plan and communicating that plan and doing it in a staggered manner, so there's not, the chaos and the economic uncertainty. So, for instance, the challenge that they have right now, that they've got to inherently
Right.
realize, because they're not dumb, um, is when you do all these things at once, the second order economic impacts are significant in a lot of different towns, cities, states. So when you cut, like they're
Mhm.
cutting the forestry service, and a lot of those people live in small towns in the state of Washington or the state of Oregon, and now all of a sudden those towns,
Sure.
their economies are decimated. When you say you're going to cut all these grants from all these colleges, now all of a sudden they need to fire people. They need to, cut way back. Then you have the contractors that work in DC, that, whatever it is that they're contracted for, now their contracts are gone, right, or reduced significantly. So they have to cut back on people. All these things, when they're aggregated together in one town, or across, cities, or in cities, that has a significant economic impact. Then you have the uncertainty of the tariffs. It's not so much that tariffs are bad, it's just that how you implement the tariffs and where, and whether it's
Mhm.
strategic or across the board, makes a huge difference. But when you have this tariff uncertainty, on top of all the firings that look like they're going to be firings, on top of all the cutbacks on the grants, on top of all the
Right.
NIH academic research cuts, and then on top of that, you've got the contractors who no longer have contracts and they have to fire people, or they go out of business. All those things add up into a lot of money that have a significant amount of impact. The cost of tariffs just is not just the
Sure.
cost of the tariff. There is a cost beyond the cost of the tariff. And I'll give you one perfect
Okay.
example. One of my Shark Tank companies is just crushing it, crushing it. And there's growing their sales, they're growing everything, but their product is one that they can't just raise their price. There's
Okay.
just not the pricing elasticity that other products may have. And so, knowing they can't raise their price, they have to cut back cost elsewhere in order to be able to take the margin that they're going to lose, whether it's a 10, 15,
Mhm.
20, 25% tariffs. And one of the things that they did was cancel a $2 million conference for all the people, all their stakeholders in the state of Florida.
Mhm.
Gone,
So
gone.
I think you really got to it though. That there's the second order effect and the ripple effects that happen from these things. It's like a classic unintended consequence in economics, where you think I'm going to take this one step, but
Yep.
that step actually ends up with having five or six other steps you're not following along, and it ends up because look, I think when the next jobs report comes out, it's going to blow a huge hole in the next jobs report, and
I don't know if it's the next
true, yeah,
one. Like we
yeah,
saw, I don't. Right. It's hard to
hmm
predict exactly when, but like we saw the stuff that just came
pretty
out for
soft,
February, and there were a lot of people. Yeah,
yeah,
it wasn't so bad. Inflation was down a tenth, right? A lot of that was because companies bought more inventory so that they wouldn't have to raise their price. But what you're seeing is other companies who are taking advantage of the tariffs. It's the old dishwasher thing during Trump one, right? Where he put
right.
tariffs on dishwashers. And despite the fact that he took
Dishwashers.
them off, the price of dishwashers
You know,
still went up, right? And you'll see the same thing happening here. Companies will raise, where the companies have pricing elasticity, they will raise their prices for one
right, and
reason,
they'll say,
because they
well,
can.
it's the tariffs, but even if it's not any longer the tariffs. Um, I mean, you heard a million pitches on Shark Tank from folks, and supply chains globally, almost everybody relies on a pretty
Sure.
complex global supply chain that needs to have the least amount of friction that it can for people to make a profit. And I worry about the
Correct.
combination of the tariff war stuff and the shaky international position we're finding ourselves in now. That the global supply chain is much more fragile than people think. When you get it pressured from two separate sides. Um,
I don't know necessarily that it's more fragile, because the countries that were facing tariffs aren't dumb either, right? They went and created
sure.
alternatives, and you know, China opened companies in Mexico and in Canada. Even here's the
Right.
biggest thing that's crazy that most of your podcast
Okay.
listeners probably don't get. So the relationship between China and selling
Mhm.
on Amazon, and the relationship with Chinese companies and Amazon. It is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And it's the ultimate, you talk about hacks, day to day hacks, the ultimate business
Mhm.
hack for Chinese companies. But it's an example of, gaming the supply chain. So if you are a Chinese company that manufactures a consumer good, and you want to sell it on Amazon, you would think that at some point you need to register
Mhm.
as an American company, or register in some manner, so that the government knows who you are, if only so that we can collect taxes for economic
Yeah.
connected income. That's what they call it, ECI. No, no. You can have Amazon will accept your Chinese registration
I
as a
had no
company.
idea. I had no idea.
So literally, and it works with, yeah, and it works with other countries too, but Chinese is just the prime example. China's just the prime example. So you can sell on Amazon and sell what everything you can knock off. So if Rick and Mark create a company, go on Shark Tank, come up with this great idea, someone in China knocks it off, there ain't shit I
Right.
can do, because it there's not even a company registration for that Chinese company. It's whack-a-mole, and it's a pain in the ass. I've had it happen. It's happened a lot. But to the bigger point, so these companies in China are creating, are con- creating, using FBA and all the
Mhm.
the Amazon features, right, without actually registering their company in the United States, ever, ever. And they're still, even though they're not registered, they're still supposed to pay taxes on the income that they create, because
To the
there's an
US.
economic connection, and I think it's Form 11
Right.
F1120. Don't quote me on that. I've just been reading up on this. That's how I know it. It's not like I inherently know this stuff, but it was so
That's
insane to me, so insane. How many billions of dollars are in place? And then on top of that, but wait, there's more, right? You've got the same thing happening if you're selling on
sure.
Alibaba, if you're selling on Temu and Shine and all that. Um, and I'm sure it happens on other online platforms. I don't know how Walmart does it. Um, but but there's this thing called de minimis on tariffs, where if you ship goods in that's less than $800, and the Trump administration, to their credit, is trying to do that.
Mhm.
Biden tried but didn't get it done. Trump, I know, is trying and hasn't gotten it done yet. If you're shipping something in and it's less than $800, you're not paying tariffs. And so not only you're not paying tariffs, you're not paying income tax on the billions, tens of billions of foreign goods sold off of Amazon. But wait, there's more. But wait, there's more, right? In the event that you are shipping to a Chinese company, let's just say I'm a Chinese company that
Sure.
sells toilet seats. I don't know, I'm just picking something out of left field, right? And I have a subsidiary that truly
Right.
is registered in the United States, and we compete against
Mhm.
Mark and Rick's toilet seats. Well, I know I then there's let's say there's a 25% tariff, and Mark and Rick buy my toilet seats, right? You've been buying from
Yeah.
me, you import them in, I sell them to you for $10 each, you pay your 25% tariff. Okay, no big deal. But I have a Chinese company, there's a Chinese company that sells the same thing. I'm going to sell it to my subsidiary company, not for $10, but let's just say for $6, because when we go over and there's a tariff, you pay a 25% tariff on $6 instead of $10 to give another competitive financial advantage over American companies. There's so many ways you can deal with this, and that's something that is critically important. And I've tried to raise a stink about it, and there's a lot of Amazon sellers that try to raise a stink about it. But if you really want to collect money from foreign companies that are selling over
Man,
here,
that
make
seems
them
like
register and
the
pay.
shortest path and the path of actual least resistance because all it does is level the playing field in an actual way, not in the sort of like whack-a-mole chase the rabbit way of tariffs and then somebody else reciprocates and you're playing ping
Exactly.
pong back and
And
forth.
Donald Trump would be great at this, right? Going to these foreign countries and saying, look, you're ripping off all these American entrepreneurs. But one of the things that's unfortunate, and look, there's a lot I don't like about Trump, but I'll give him credit where credit is due. And he can negotiate, he can create PR, and he'll do some smart things. But he would kill it going to China and these foreign countries and say, look, you're ripping off our American entrepreneurs. But the one thing is, he doesn't like to he doesn't talk about entrepreneurs. He only talks about the big companies, the $100 billion deals, the $500 billion deals, the trillion. He doesn't, it's unfortunate he doesn't talk about, the person in Idaho or Florida or Tennessee starting a toilet, a toilet seat company in their basement.
Right. I mean, I think you and I both agree. I mean, this country needs to get its
Well, yes
manufacturing
or no,
base
yes
back
or
in
no,
order.
yes or no,
And
right? So we can talk about that if you want.
okay, I'm curious. I mean, look, I think we have some strategic
Yes,
holes in our
100%.
manufacturing base right now that are, to my mind, pretty dangerous for not
Yeah,
only
so
for our economic health,
strategically,
but
yeah,
for our security
strategically,
and
yes,
everything
I agree
else.
with you across the board. The things we have to manufacture for the military and stuff like that, but those are going to be
Sure.
robotics driven, right? And that's the new infrastructure, robotics.
Right.
But
Well, and it's like the lag time on buying generators or
no,
turbines or jet engines is
it's
now
insane.
90
Yeah, it's
months
insane.
for industrial size
Yeah, it's
generators.
insane.
That's crazy town. And and it would seem to me there would be plenty of ways to tap that great American entrepreneurial drive and spirit. And yes, you combine AI, you combine robotics, you combine computer aided machining, all those things rolling into. I mean, that's one of the great shames of this whole moment. I think is like the tariffs are on, they're off, they're on, they're off. If you have the shock of we got to do this ourselves in some of these places, America tends to do it itself once it gets
Yep.
sufficiently scared or pissed off or exasperated. But it's just like I'm just curious, like as an entrepreneur, as a serial entrepreneur, I'm just curious, like where you think like the market for companies doing big infrastructure things like that, doing big the complex manufacturing stuff that we've outsourced to China and Korea and Germany and other places for a long time. Um, and it's not that we don't have the technical skills or the know-how. We know how to do this stuff. I mean, we just don't structure our thinking about it, I think, in the right way. But is it just
No, no.
short-termitis
I
that's
mean,
led
I'll
us
tell you
there? I'm
exactly
just
what's
curious what your
gotten us
take
there.
on
And,
why.
we have a trade surplus in services. And we have a global trade surplus in
Yeah,
services because that's where the most margin is. That's where the most profitability is. And so if you're an American
sure.
investor, even if you're an international investor and you're investing in the United States, you're going to go where the greatest returns are. And so that's why China has become so good at manufacturing, because they can be a low cost provider, and the investment return for
Hmm.
the government and investors there, they're employed people from the countryside that come up during the busy season, and that's just not the same here. Now, and where you need to take that is we need to continue to invest in AI. We need to invest more in robotics. We've had some really good robotic software company, but to your point, you got to win the software layer first, the AI software layer first, because if you can't do that, then
Right.
it doesn't matter what you can actually build, because you're not going to be able to build competitively. So you've got to win that layer first. And then the underneath
Sure.
the physical layer, the physical manufacturing, we've got to start winning robotics. We're not a leader in physical robotics. And so building the robots and selling the robots. Right now,
Hmm.
that's Germany, Japan, and China. And so we've got to invest in that.
Hmm.
I wrote a blog post years ago saying our new infrastructure shouldn't be about roads and bridges anymore. Fix those, but our new infrastructure, where we really need to invest as a country, is in robotics. It's the old Dustin Hoffman plastics. Now it's
Yeah.
robots. Yeah, we're
Plastics.
we're dating ourselves, but now it's robots, because in order to make all these strategic things, they're all going to require robots and robotics. And so they may be cobots that work side by side by a person, but we need to make that investment in order to do these things.
Yeah, I think that's it's also one of the things that takes people out of horrible, dangerous jobs in a lot of cases. I'd much rather have a robot, I don't know, digging coal or something than having a human down there or working
Yeah, I
in
mean,
a
hopefully
steel
we'll
mill
have
in a lot
nobody
of ways.
digging ore, digging coal, right? but but your point is well taken, right? There's the
True.
dangerous jobs that robots, once they get the manual dexterity. There's military, and you see what's happening in Ukraine with Russia, where it's about drones as much as it's anything else.
Sure.
And so being able to robotically manufacture drones that are more advanced, we have to win that. Um, and being able to make products, like you can't make t-shirts yet with a robot. Do we really have to worry about making t-shirts, or can we give that to China as a low margin business and say you take the t-shirts? But I agree with
Hmm.
you, where we identify something that needs to be manufactured here that's strategic for any number of reasons, then yeah, we need to invest in it. But we can't pretend that we're bringing back the old traditional jobs, where someone's just on that's just on a manufacturing floor and just screwing in screws. Those days are gone.
I've counseled Democrats and Republicans over the years of my career about that. It's like
No,
don't lie to people that we're going to have guys welding shit all day long on an
gone.
assembly line
Well,
anymore.
yeah,
It's that's not the world anymore.
like we have in
Don't
Dallas,
lie to
at CostPlus Drugs, we manufacture sterile injectables, and we use all robots that we can change in
people. Hmm.
4 hours to a new drug. But we have 45 people that have to manage all that
Sure.
stuff and have to keep them up and running and have to monitor
Hmm.
them. Now we use AI to do a lot of that, but trust me, I get the emails and this breaks or that happens, and so and I'm not even
Sure.
opposed to having a conversation of taxing robots by the hour. So it's just as a revenue
Sure.
source. You don't want to create so much friction that it slows down development and our next industrial, if you will, revolution. But a nickel an hour that a robot works across all the robots that, the millions of robots, I think, it's probably affordable and it contributes to, you know, tax revenues, which is a good thing.
Right. And I want to talk to you again about cost plus drugs because I'm kind of fascinated by this as part of your entrepreneurial journey. Because, like I said in the beginning, you looked at like
Yeah.
what's a hard problem in healthcare. What's a problem? Everybody goes, "Yep, you can't fix that problem," but you are going at that problem. Talk to us about like how you decided to form Cost Plus Drugs and give people an idea of how it works and how it's
So it
working
got
for
started.
folks.
I got into healthcare during Trump one because they were looking at overturning the ACA. And some people came to me and
Hmm.
said, this is something, you're an entrepreneur. Um, would you start looking at this? And I did, and didn't really come up with a great solution, but some things. And then, as I was talking about those things, I got a cold email from a Dr. Alex Oshmayansky out of Denver, who was creating a compounding pharmacy
Okay.
to create drugs that were on short supply. That things like there's a lot of pediatric cancer drugs, believe it or not, that go on short supply lists. Or
Right.
pitocin, steroids, all this stuff. And he's like, I want to build this endeavor.
Hmm.
Would you
Hmm.
invest? And I started asking him questions. And this was right around the time that the Pharma Bro was going to jail, maybe 2019, whatever it was. And I was like,
Okay.
and I
Okay.
started asking Alex questions. I'm like, how can this dude take this generic drug, Daraprim, and jack up the price like that? And because basically he bought a year's
Hmm.
supply from the one manufacturer and just ripped up the price. I'm like,
Right.
let me dig into this because there's got to be something more there. And then you start thinking about it. It's very simple.
Right.
You get a prescription, and you and I are that age now. We got one, maybe two, right? And couple. And you
Couple.
go to the
Yeah.
doctor and you say, Rick, Mark, you need this medication. What's the next thing they say? What pharmacy
Mhm.
do you use? That's it. That is it. They don't say,
Right.
how much does it cost? You have no idea
Mhm.
what it costs. You have no idea, if you get insurance from your employer, how much the employer is having to pay. Nobody knows or knew the cost of medications at all. And so I'm like, look, this is,
Right.
obviously an opaque industry. What if we brought some transparency to it? So we got the URL Cost Plus Drugs, and we set it up so that you go to costplusdrugs.com. You put in the name of the medication. We don't carry them all. We're getting there. We carry about 2,500, give or take.
Mhm.
And you put
Mhm.
in the name, and where we change the
Okay.
game, we'll show you our actual cost. So if metformin, tadalafil, imatinib, whatever it may be, you type it
Mhm.
in there, type in the strength, whatever you need, the number of units you need, 30, 60, 90, however many, and we'll show you exactly what it cost us.
Mhm.
Then we show you our markup, which is only 15%. And then we're primarily mail order. So if it's
Right.
mail order, you pay $5 to have our mail order pharmacist review everything to make sure it's all hunky dory, and then $5 to ship. And now we have an affiliate network, and so you can also pick it up at a local pharmacy. You just make those choices. So we did two things. So just marking it up by showing our cost and marking it up 15%, our prices were dramatically lower, particularly for high-end drugs that are used for cancer and stuff like that. And so, there's drugs like
Right.
imatinib, droxidopa, where, if you just walk into a pharmacy today, they might charge you $2,000, and our price, depending on the strength, might be $13. I mean, it's just insane. And then we expanded it and we added our cost plus drugs manufacturing, which, as I mentioned, is all robotics driven. And we make sterile injectables and biosimilars so that when there's a shortage for pediatric cancer drugs,
Okay.
we can make it so that those kids get the medications they need.
And markets when people have information in
Yeah.
markets,
I mean,
markets
the
do their
smartest
magic.
thing that we did, Rick.
When they don't have information, that's fascinating. I mean, you really manufacturing brilliant, figuring out the fact that people will be driven by good information. That I think is
Oh, for
the
sure.
real secret sauce of
Right.
this.
The thing we
That's an
didn't
amazing
expect, the thing that we did
innovation.
that was the smartest thing. Um, we actually publish our entire price list of all 2,500 plus drugs. And where
Mhm.
that turned out to be far more
Right.
impactful than I ever anticipated when I put it out there is all the researchers who hopefully still have jobs now, all the researchers are able to compare what CMS was paying for, metformin or for imatinib. We just got somebody from one of the agencies
Right.
who's sent us a connection to the contract they were using for pharmaceuticals, and we're a third of the price. And so there's researchers are using us and coming out with reports saying, if CMS bought these 9 urology drugs from CostPlus Drugs, they'd save $900 million a year. If they bought these 12 um, oncology drugs, they'd save $2.3 billion a year. Just stuff like that, now that that information was out there, everything started to change.
So pharma companies that on the manufacturing side, they legitimately
Yeah.
a lot of time put in a lot of research into these things. They invest on the front end. They deserve to be compensated for that kind of thing. But there are layers in here that you guys have identified basically
Yep.
that aren't adding value to the chain. Like these benefit manager people are not
Correct.
adding value to the patient
Correct.
or the doctor or the cure. It's just a
Yep.
cost layer in there. Um, and that to me was like identifying a broken part of a system is as good as building
100%,
an
right? You're
effective part
100%
of a
right.
system
The
in a lot of
challenge,
ways.
though, is the big pharmacy benefit managers are some of the biggest companies in the world, definitely some of the top biggest. So, our
Sure.
biggest challenge isn't with the manufacturers per se. What's happening is like the drugs we don't carry are typically
Mhm.
brand name drugs, the Eliquis of the world. And the reason we don't carry them is
Sure.
because the big manufacturers for all the brand drugs are telling us that if we sell to you, or actually the way it works is they have these marketing rebate programs. If we give you a marketing rebate program, right, then the big PBMs are going to remove us or reduce our presence on their formularies, which means that they're going to lose billions, if not, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in revenue. So they're basically saying, Mark, we would wish we could work with you, but we can't. And that's our biggest challenge because we have really turned the world of PBMs upside down. So anybody out there who's a CEO of a company that has 25, 50, 100, 1,000, 5,000, 100,000, 500,000 lives that you're responsible for their benefits, you are getting ripped off on your pharmacy benefits and on your healthcare
Mhm.
benefits, which are as bad, if not worse, than the pharmacy side. And we're creating Cost Plus, something called Cost Plus Wellness, where we're actually going to all the providers and hospitals, negotiating direct contracts, and then we'll publish those contracts so companies can copy what we're doing.
I was going to ask you: is there a follow-on act because the health you've taken on a part of that vertical power structure of the healthcare system, but there's a lot more to it. So
Oh, for
there is a
sure.
sort of
For
second
sure. Like
chapter to
it is
this
so
idea.
back ass half words on both sides, pharmacy and healthcare. But I'll give you the most fundamental example of how ridiculously stupid um, the healthcare side is. So you have an insurance plan, I presume,
Mhm.
that you have? Okay. So, and there's an insurance
Sure.
company,
Hmm.
they call them the BUCAs, the biggest insurance companies, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Health,
Yeah.
etc. Um, and those companies create different plans for different markets. They'll create a set of plans for the ACA. They'll
Hmm.
create sets of plans for Medicare Advantage, for self-insured employers, for companies that give group plans. And
Yep.
in those plans, they'll set different variations. They'll say, "Here's our premium, and the higher the premium, the lower the deductible." Right? And then ACA buyers will
Right.
choose, I'm younger, I want a higher deductible, lower premium. Your company will offer you choices.
Hmm.
I'm older, I want a lower premium, I mean, a higher premium, lower deductible because I might get sick, but we all make our choices. Now, the crazy part is, you know
Hmm.
who has to take the risk in the event a patient can't afford the deductible? They chose in a plan they bought that an insurance company created. You know who takes all that risk in the event that that patient can't
Tell me.
afford that deductible? It's not the government. It's the hospitals and the doctors. They become subprime
Right.
lenders effectively. So
Right.
when you hear all these stories about medical debt and how bad the hospitals are for trying to collect the medical debt, they don't set the deductibles. When there's a $5,000 deductible ACA plan, the insurance companies are like, thank you very much for taking this high deductible plan because I'll get the premiums without fail, otherwise I'll cancel you. And the risk for the deductible is on the hospital when they go in there. And so now the
Right.
hospitals become subprime lenders. They become the bad guys because they have to go collect money from all these patients. And
Mhm.
the patients now have all this debt and going bankrupt, et cetera, et cetera. But what happens when they can't collect the debt? They have to raise prices for your health care to compensate for what they couldn't collect.
It's a ratchet that
It's
keeps going. That ratchet keeps
Yeah,
going
and
one
it's like
way, and that's
this
up.
vicious circle of pricing. And so the hospitals create these things called facility fees, which are its own ripoff, and site neutral pricing. And then the
Mhm.
insurance companies complain. I mean, there's 10 other things that the insurance companies do that make it more expensive for patients. And so what we're trying to do with Cost Plus Wellness is just simplify it. Because the reason we can have an impact, healthcare is very simple. You go to the doctor may or may not give you a prescription. The doctor may say you need to go for this care or that care.
Yeah.
And there's only two questions. How much are they going to charge you? And how are you going to pay for it? That's it. That is all of the
Right.
uncertainty in healthcare. So what we're saying is let's work on that. What's the charge? And let's work on helping people figure out how they're going to pay for it and make it transparent. Because if we can make it all transparent, then we might be able to follow the path that Canada went through in 1948, where one of their provinces said, look, we know in our province, the claims and the costs for everybody, and we think we can afford to pay for it ourselves
Mhm.
and just charge premiums via taxes to all of our constituents, all of our citizens in that province. So we'll cover that, and that was the first universal health care in 1948 in Canada. And so, like for my
Mm.
companies, for where we just started it this year, where we have direct contracts, there's no pre-authorization. So if an employee gets sick and goes to where we have a direct contract, right, in network, there's no pre-authorizations. We trust the doctor. We want them working as a doctor. There's no intercompany charge nonsense
Sure.
that the insurance companies pay. And there's no out-of-pocket deductible or out-of-pocket cost at all to our employee or their family. So in exchange for covering all those costs, it effectively in exchange for covering all those costs, we get a better price from the hospitals and the doctors because it's all cash up front. There's
Right.
no
Right.
receivables for them. Here's cash. So now I have a better feel because my costs are lower because I'm not cash constrained to do this. So
Right.
effectively, I have single payer for the people who work for me for in-network claims. And once you have that transparency, you could grow it. Companies, on one hand, it's bad because we get our health insurance through companies, but if you had no out of pocket, it wouldn't be so bad. As long as the premiums were reasonable. And let's just say you're a city and you have
Mhm.
50,000 people and you have all your claims history and you can do an actuarial analysis of what your costs are going to be. And you say to people in your city, okay,
Sure.
we're going to charge a 2% tax, sales tax surcharge to pay for all the health care of everybody who lives in our town and pays taxes to ourselves. That is the path
Right.
that we want to go. It's pure capitalism where companies and cities and states, and towns get to make
Mhm.
their own decisions once they understand what the costs are. But if we can do it transparently, then you have a path to universal health care. The reason why we can't just convert to universal health care today is nobody knows what the damn prices are. The price of rent's too damn high and nobody knows what it is, right?
This is a fascinating conversation because it really does get down to that old conservative economic principle of the differential of information is what causes
Correct.
markets to be inefficient. And when everybody has the information and there's no excuse now, you were just talking about like they could do an actuarial analysis.
Yes.
AI is perfect for that kind of thing. We can trim this, we can get this stuff generated down to a way to target it. So you're not over or
Well,
underpaying
exactly, right.
for
And
the
you
service.
don't have the Canadian
You're
or
not
UK problem where because it's all just handled by the federal government, or in Canada's place, the provinces,
Mhm.
they limit they look at the tax
Right.
revenue they have, and then they limit what
Yeah,
services they offer. You can have it. Right. So you
right.
can
They
create your
throttle
own
it. Yeah.
equilibriums, right? You can balance things out the way you want, and but you put it in the hands, as long as it's transparent and everybody has that information, like you just said, then people know what's going on, and people know why decisions are being made the way they are, and they can make their own choices.
Well, Mark, I have to tell you, I am deeply impressed by you in a lot of ways. Your political candor,
Well,
especially on Blue
thanks.
Sky lately, has been outstanding. I love it. You as an entrepreneur taking on one of the thorniest, weirdest, hard, like ugliest balls of yarn in healthcare stuff is just absolutely admirable in every way. And I am so grateful you came on the show today. I really appreciate your
Appreciate you,
time,
Rick. Yeah.
and look forward to having you back in the future at some point.
Yeah, we need to talk politics. We really didn't get a chance to talk politics.
You know what? We will do it again. Okay, we will absolutely dive in because you have an interesting position, I think, in the political ecosystem right now, and a lot of people are talking about you for the future, and
Yeah, I'm not
we'll
running
see where
for
that
office.
journey
I'm,
goes.
I'm, I'm not running for office, but I am going to try to push the AI the shit out of politics, because
Good,
the balance, we need that balance of all viewpoints, and understanding how to use
100%.
AI to flood the zone so that
Yeah,
everybody's got to respond is really important. Like, and you guys know it too. You guys do a lot of the same things.
we do our best. But thank you again, Mark. I really appreciate you coming on the show today, and I want to continue this conversation in the future.
You got it, Rick. Thanks for having me on. That was fun.
Good night and good luck.